This is Diamond D with where I'm giving you some love advice, some happiness advice, some everyday good advice to make your day a little more loving. Hi, I'm Diamond D, and this is Love and Happiness, where we will discuss everyday topics around love and happiness to make your day a little bit better. Our guest today is Miss Enya Hargett, who holds 3 degrees, including 2 master's degrees from Columbia and Indiana University. Ms. Hargett received her clinical training from St. Luke's Hospital in New York, and she has just opened up a new practice in Charlotte, North Carolina called Grace and Resilience, Counseling and Wellness. Please welcome Ms. Hargett to today's show.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being on the show today. I appreciate you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit about your practice in Charlotte that you're opening.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I've been in private practice for about 5 years and have worked with different groups and with different clinicians, but thought, for a while I want to, see what it's like to have my own practice and really set the tone for the kind of work I want to do. And so over the years I've been working, 2 attributes really stood out to me that show kind of how folks move through difficult times. Mm-hmm. Grace for yourself, grace towards other people, and resilience. How do you get through tough times? How do you pull through and use your coping skills to manage challenges? So I named the practice Grace and Resilience because I feel like those are the 2 things I want to teach to my clients I work with. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so why did you choose Charlotte?
I love Charlotte. I'm actually a North Carolinian. I was born and raised in Chapel Hill. I have family in Charlotte, and so it's sort of a personal move, but I also thought it's a great place to be challenged in a larger city, a larger area. And there's lots of need, I think, everywhere for great mental health clinicians. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'd move there.
Wonderful,
yeah.
Wonderful. I know you had previously mentioned that your practice will focus on pre-marital counseling. Mm-hmm. What other areas are you going to specialize?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. So I do individual counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the therapy I've been trained in and I've been practicing for 10 years. I also offer group therapy. So for folks who want to find support with other people who are also working towards meeting similar goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you find that in your premarital counseling, some of that counseling sort of trickles into the actual marriage counseling, and how long does that typically take?
Great question. So I offer a 6-session premarital package that we cover very distinct topics, and I have a lot of couples that will roll over into marital counseling once they've gotten established a rapport with me. They already sort of know me. After they get married, they'll just continue with marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. And so some of the same topics will come up in both. Mm-hmm.
What does a successful marriage look like?
Great question. I think a successful marriage is comprised of strong communication, really for both individuals to really know themselves pretty well, to then, ask for what they need from their partner. That to me is the foundation. The other things I think are fruits of that. Mm-hmm. So I think communication is the key. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so do you think that a marriage that has, good communications is sort of divorce proof? How can you immune your marriage from, just the problems that come about prior to a divorce?
Absolutely. I think it's important to have a strong communication base. I think that question sort of is a great one, but we never have divorce-proof methods, right? We always want to try to do things to establish strong connections, but nothing is guaranteed, right? So I think it's just a matter of taking stock of what you have and just working every day towards meeting that goal of today I want to stay married, tomorrow I want to stay married, and just making decisions every day to kind of support that.
Mm-hmm. That's real good. So you need communication and daily steps that sort of say, I'm going to stay to make your marriage work. Because so many people, I think, sometimes go through marriage and then they start experiencing problems. Yeah. And then they say, okay, well, I could solve my marital problems because I have a baby. And with a baby, that'll make them stay. Yes. But that's not always the case, right?
Absolutely. I think children add stress. Children are wonderful, but they are often tests of that bond that you have. They're not the salve to creating a stronger bond. But people often assume that. Yeah,
and that's really sad. How do you suggest a person deal with a person they're dating, but they haven't ventured into being in a committed relationship yet because the person is just, have that fear of commitment. How do you handle those, and how do you define a fear of commitment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for individuals who have fear of commitment and the other person wants a commitment, that to me is a deal breaker. What you don't want to be in the position of is having to convince someone to commit to you, because that often will backfire. So I think that, the work is for that individual. They have to kind of do some soul searching and figure out why they have a fear of commitment. But it's not for that other person to kind of define and guide that work. So I would say kind of to back off, really.
Yeah.
Not to go closer or to add pressure.
And that's important. I think sometimes people feel like, okay, I'm fighting for this relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to make that person love me and make that
goodness.
person commit. And you can't fight for a relationship you don't have.
No.
So the only other alternative would be to back off.
Absolutely. Or if you're going to be fighting, both people should be fighting together.
Yeah.
Not one and the other one's like, whatever, I'm good.
I agree. Nowadays I see a lot of people doing like online dating.
Yeah.
Do you have like any strategies or tips for like those who are sort of online dating, trying to find their future husband or their future wife?
Absolutely. I actually lead a group around online dating, and so I call it sort of my online dating boot camp. And there are a number of things that you can do to position yourself to meet a great partner. I think it starts with authenticity in what you're describing. So knowing who you are and knowing how you describe that in that little like description box. They kind of give you like 300 words or something. I would say not to write the generic things, but to really give examples of who you are. And so you can, if you're funny, be a little humorous. If you are someone who, loves animals, put that out there. But don't be afraid to don't be afraid to be yourself.
Yes. That's very good.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah.
I think we have time for our first caller.
Okay.
Hello, caller. You're on the air with Love and Happiness with Diamond D and Miss Hargett. How can we help you?
Hi, Dee. I'm just so upset. My husband says that he wants to stay married, but he has moved out of the bedroom. What should I do?
Thank you. Miss Hargett?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess I would have questions around what's happened, what's the context that's led to him moving out of the bedroom. But I do think it's important to go find a couples counselor to talk these things through, to get help. Sometimes conversations need the support of a third party to kind of facilitate and give tips on how to have hard conversations.
Very good, very good. Nowadays I think that sometimes there are what I like to term home wreckers that cause marital dysfunction.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes they do it just because they want that person who they can't have. Right. So they do whatever means necessary to try to break up a happy home.
Yeah.
Are there characteristics of that particular personality type?
That's a great question. I would say I don't have that firm, statistic, but I would say over my work in practice and working with individuals that are engaged in that kind of relationship, it's just an overall lack of boundaries. So either in their childhood, they were taught that boundaries don't matter, they were not taught self-respect, or even just to be someone's one and only partner, but that their self-worth is at the level of, I'm someone's sort of side relationship. So I think it does come from a lack in that individual that they then choose to be someone's, extra partner.
I agree. Do you think that after someone has experienced sort of that cheating in a relationship that they can go about and have a happy marriage? And if you do, like, what are the tools and the strategies they can use to kind of restore their marriage after an affair?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. All these questions are great. I keep saying that. So there are two types of infidelity. There's chronic infidelity, where that is just a pattern no matter what's going on. And then there's situational infidelity, where, it may happen once or twice in the length of a marriage, but there are typically situations that led up to that. And there's also remorse, and there's a sense of, I don't want to do this in my marriage. I think that second type are the types that I work with as far as, how do we overcome this and stay together. For chronic infidelity, I think that is a deal breaker. And that's been kind of how I've addressed it in couples counseling. So I think it's going to get help from a counselor. It's communication. It's talking about what are the ways that we can stay connected. And it's just being transparent about what your needs are. That's how you overcome a infidelity in
Do you
marriage.
think it's difficult for husbands to overcome that cheating versus the wives? Because sometimes I see that the wives are more willing to forgive, and maybe it's just because of the natural upbringing of women and being more sociable. I don't know if that's true or not, but do you think that men have a hard time forgiving and trying to, rekindle that marriage versus a wife?
Yeah, I would say the way that men are socialized in our country to manage their feelings, women have far more support in their girlfriends, and then they go to work out and they have kind of regular practices of self-care. I think for men they have limited spaces to emote, so I think they have a harder time in forgiving, but they can. I've seen it happen, but I think women have a better way of expressing their feelings.
So you think that they're more willing to accept and resolve the marriage as opposed to, men just saying you cheated and that's it?
I don't want to say that. I've seen men forgive. I've seen men overcome. But I do think that the men that overcome have to break their patterns of keeping their feelings locked up inside and not talking about what they feel. They have to access some outside support. So whether it's individual counseling, whether it's talking with a pastor, whether it's having a friend that is involved, but you need help to overcome this kind of betrayal.
Do you think that changes if there is a child from the extramarital affair? Because that sort of complicates things a little bit.
I would say so.
Yeah.
It definitely, it complicates the forgiveness process, but I've seen that happen too.
When you're dating someone, how do you know if you're compatible with them? Is there some type of, compatibility golden strategy that you should be looking for in terms of finding out whether this is a potential, husband or wife?
Yeah. I think there are 3 areas that you can check in around. Your values, how you see the world, what are your goals for the future. If they're aligned and you see that person fitting into that, and they see you fitting into theirs, that to me is really important. I think it's also what examples did you see growing up of marriage, of relationships. And if they're somewhat aligned, then I think that's important that you guys work towards that goal. But if one person's like, I want an open relationship, one person's like, I want monogamy, that to me is very incompatible. And you're not going to be able to really get over that. And I think the third one is, again, communication. How does this person communicate their feelings? Do they have a practice in doing that? So you want to, as you're dating someone, just check in and, ask those questions.
Very good. I think we have time for a second caller.
Okay.
Hi, caller. You're on the air with Love and Happiness with Diamond D with myself and Miss Hargett. How can we help you?
Hey, what's up, D? My name is Joseph. I have a couple of questions I want to ask. Why do you think women cheat in a relationship? And how do you know when a woman is thinking about cheating?
Okay, thank you, Joseph.
Okay.
Can you
I'll take
respond to
this.
Joseph's
Absolutely. This is a popular question. I hear it from men and women, I think for women, and not to generalize all women because everyone's different, but I think the emotional connection is what keeps women connected to relationships. So when they're not feeling heard or seen or understood in the relationship, then the tendency is to look outside the relationship and get that elsewhere.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit about your personal career journey, how you got to this point. Were you able to, manage to make your purpose your profession?
Great question. I don't know if I've done that yet. I think I'm getting there. But I think it's about knowing what you want to do in the world and what makes you excited and kind of, light up. And if that's happening at work, how do you make that happen more at work? So I think for me, being in this practice in Durham, I've had some of that, but then I think the next step is, okay, now I want to be like the boss and set the standards and really kind of define how my work goes in the community. So I think, I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Oh, yes, perfectly.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Hargett, how does a healthy relationship look?
A healthy relationship looks like 2 individuals that have done their internal work. So maybe they both have individually been in counseling and they know kind of their history and what they're bringing, and they have strong communication, whether they check in every day or, how are we doing emotionally? Also, they're working together to do the logistical things, like, paying their bills on time and, saving money together, all the things that the teamwork part of relationships. If all those things are happening, I'd say that's a pretty healthy relationship.
And how does an unhealthy relationship look like?
Yes.
The other side of
The other
tree.
side,
The
I would
spectrum.
say, like very inconsistent communication, lack of boundaries, right? So together too much, and kind of the clinginess that sometimes can happen in unhealthy relationships, and then just not a consistent teamwork. So one person's off on their own, and the other person's over here, and there's not a lot of like synchronicity happening.
Sometimes I think that people get caught up in a relationship that is so unhealthy that it goes to the point of being abusive. As a friend observing that situation, what can the friend do? And can you talk a little bit more about the types of abuse in a relationship?
Absolutely. I think it's a tough position for any friend to be in, to see their friend in a relationship where they're not being respected and honored. There are three types, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and verbal abuse. And I think they all are devastating to the individuals involved. I think the friend can, depending on how the friendship is, how close you are, should address it and should just give feedback non-judgmentally of what they observe, what they knew of this friend before the relationship and what they're seeing now. And be prepared for the friend to be, defensive and resistant. But that at least for that friend's conscience, they've done their part in saying what they've seen. So I think it's tough to kind of go to bed at night knowing that you're seeing something that you haven't said anything about.
Do you think that sometimes they overlook the signs of the physical, verbal, and emotional abuse? I think it's easier to see, the physical abuse if you have a friend that they're, you could see the outward harm to their physical body.
Absolutely.
Versus a friend who may have been experiencing emotional abuse and that just is not being as receptive to that friendship because
Absolutely.
they're being controlled or restrained by an abusive partner.
For sure. I think the signs for emotional and verbal abuse, isolation. So oftentimes the abuser wants to pull this person away from their support system. So oftentimes the person's not with their friends as much, or they're not seeing their family as much, and this person wants them all to themselves. That is emotional abuse. Other signs for verbal abuse are just a decline in their self-esteem. Things that they used to do to express themselves, they stop doing. They're not going out and having fun as much, or they're not as connected into the community. They just sort of believe that they're not worth those things anymore. Typically, that's a result of verbal abuse. Thank you.
I think that nowadays when people are dating, and if you're dating and you're over 40, you're dating for a committed relationship.
Absolutely.
So, what is the magic number of either dates or times that a person should sort of be, I guess, evaluating the person that they're interacting with to see whether it needs to go to a committed relationship?
Yeah. I say give yourself 6 months to date without definition or exclusivity even. And for some people that's a long time, but I think that it gives you time to see them in different scenarios and situations and different seasons of the year even. If they're busier at work in the winter and you've seen them when they're busy, that's important information versus when they're like relaxed over the summer and they're always with you. So you want to give it, I think a good one is 6 to 8 months if I'm being a little bit, adding more time to the end, but no more than 8 months. I think you should know by then. And you don't want to waste your time. Time is of the essence.
Yeah. That is so true. Very well said.
Thank you.
I have encountered some people who feel like they can't commit until they really see all of the emotions that person can experience. Whether, they want to see how the girl or the lady acts when they're angry. How they handle their, their emotional up cycle versus down cycle. What do you think about that?
I think that's important. I think when you're dating someone over 40, I jokingly say it's like an extended job interview. And the job is, can you be my life partner? So with job interviews, they ask you very poignant questions. I think your dates should be very you should have fun, obviously, but you want to ask those important questions. And, especially if you're over 40 and blending family, it gets a little bit more complicated, right? Because you're also bringing children into the picture. So you want to do your work. It's not a light process,
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your
Absolutely.
answer. I appreciate you. Ms. Hargett, let's talk a little bit about your mentors that you've had in life.
Yeah. So before I even got into this field, I had someone that I worked for in a whole other career in Washington, D.C. Her name is Ann Wilson, and she saw this talent of connecting with people, and she told me, and I was kind of shocked by it, I think you're in the wrong field. And I just gotten a master's in another field and was working, but not happy. And she said, you probably should explore what it is that you want to do with working with people one-on-one. I was doing more like macro work and government grant writing, and just felt so separated from people. So she really encouraged me. We're still in touch now.
Wonderful.
And yeah, I think she was a huge, she's still a mentor to me now.
That's awesome. Do you have any secret influencers? And I define secret influencers are those moments in your life, whether a person or a book, that sort of shaped who you are today.
Gosh, that's a great question. So back when I was like 13 and kind of like getting into like self-care stuff and self-help, Iyanla Van Zant's In the Valley was like, what is this? People talking about, your past traumas, and I was sort of this very nerdy 13-year-old that was reading about this stuff. So that was, and I've always followed her career, and she's always spoken to me, through her programming. And then Brene Brown, I love Brene Brown's work. She's also a social worker, and so I just feel kindred to her, but her work around shame and vulnerability, I'm really influenced by that work and how I practice with my clients.
Well, very good, very good.
Thank you.
Can you leave the viewers with a good love and happiness piece of advice that they can apply today?
Absolutely. I think to have a healthy relationship, you want to know yourself and be yourself with your partner. I think a lot of the problems start happening when we start pretending to be someone else, or we try to fit into this box and we're really a circle. But your healthy partner will accept you for all of your quirks and imperfections. But if you're not comfortable in being yourself, then that's the first problem that I often see with couples. So just be yourself.
Yeah, very, very, very good advice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hargett, for being on today's show. I appreciate you. You can check out more of Love and Happiness on News Talk 1450 in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area at 11:30 a.m. every Thursday on The Chris Thomas Show or on the News Talk 1450 app. Thank you to the entire Chris Thomas Show radio family, and especially my big brother, Chris Thomas, who put me on his radio show. You can follow Love and Happiness on SoundCloud, Facebook, IG, and Twitter. Let me leave you with one of my favorite Love and Happiness quotes from Dave Willis. It says, "A strong marriage is two people who choose to love each other, even on days when they struggle to like each other." Thank you for watching Love and Happiness with Diamond D. God bless you, and I love you.